I got some brutally honest advice if you're a first-time Hyrox racer and you sign up for Hyrox and now you're like, I'm just gonna go crush this. Let me save you some heartache, some pain, some frustration by giving you my best Hyrox beginner tips starting right now. What's up guys, Josiah Novak, thetruetransformation.com. Over the past 4 years, I've really fallen in love with this whole thing called Hyrox. It's an opportunity to use our healthier, more fit body to go out and challenge ourselves, get out of our comfort zone, and ultimately stay interested with health and fitness. It's not enough to just go to the gym. Once you're in shape, it's like, okay, what do I do now? We're gonna lose motivation, we're gonna lose momentum, we're gonna lose desire if all we care about is a six-pack and muscle. There just isn't that same level of interest if all you're doing is chasing physique goals. So part of our program is, number one, we get you in shape. We wanna make sure you look the way you wanna look and then feel the way you wanna feel. And then we chase performance goals. What's next? And Hyrox just happens to be one of like 30 different things you can chase, and it's becoming super popular. So of course, I've fallen into the same boat. I love it, it's great. So let me give you the best, brutally honest advice about it right now. Okay, so Hyrox is the race for everybody, okay? And I agree. I've seen people, all walks of life, all shapes and sizes, all levels of fitness, absolutely go out and finish a Hyrox race. That being said, I would strongly encourage that you set aside at least 10 weeks to fully prepare for the Hyrox. Now, 10 weeks may not be enough, but it'll be at least more than just going, okay, I work out, there's a Hyrox tomorrow, let me jump into it. Or signing up for it and then going, I'm not gonna train for it, I'm just gonna show up and do it. I promise you, you'll be in so much better shape if you outline 10 weeks at a bare minimum of training for Hyrox. I personally like to give myself 3 months, if at all possible, for the first Hyrox of the year. And then if I do another one 2 months later or 6 weeks later or whatever, I'm now in the zone and my body's prepared to go through what is ultimately a really hard challenge for Hyrox. So don't skip out on training. Plan ahead, reverse engineer when you're doing a Hyrox, give yourself at least 10 weeks. That's brutally honest advice number one. So besides being prepared for a Hyrox, the second thing to understand is that the stations themselves do require practice, and you're not gonna get away with just doing a little bit of practice, especially things like burpees or things like lunges that come later in the race, or the wall ball that you do at the very end of the race. I promise you it pays massive dividends to practice these movements and practice them every single week leading up to the Hyrox. And don't just practice them fresh. Get into what I call compromised positions where you're out of breath, your heart rate's through the roof, and then you have to go jump into wall balls. One of my favorite new workouts that I like to throw in on rotation when I get ready for the Hyrox is I go out and run the distance, which is 1,000 meters. That's how long you'll run 8 times. 1,000-meter run at a race pace, and then I go do unbroken wall balls as long as I can. So that might be 20. Some days that might be 50. Some days I might get to 75. I'm really working to get to that 100 mark. So I know confidence-wise, I can go into a Hyrox fully prepared to knock out 100 unbroken wall balls, which is the end. That's the end of the race. This is just the stuff that we got to do, right? It's like, I know we just want to jump into things, and don't get intimidated by this. This is an opportunity for you to get better at something that most people will never get better at. And most importantly, it's an opportunity for you to get better for you. You know, your confidence goes up, your resilience goes up, your pain threshold goes up. And of course, you're gonna get more fit. You know, your body fat level is gonna stay in a healthy range. Your muscle is gonna be good. Your body's just gonna feel really good. Sure, some days you won't feel great. You know, some of these workouts will beat you up and you'll feel really rough, but it's gonna be worth it. I promise you that. So the next thing I'll tell you that I've just learned by doing so many of these darn things is that it's so easy to come out of the gate hot with your race. Now, some people who are really experienced, who are literally professionals at this stuff, their pace when they start might appear to be like crazy. And honestly, it probably is, but they've trained to start the race fast and then finish fast. I've seen even like the most recent winner at the Hyrox World Championships, he kind of started out a little slower. He almost played a little bit of the tortoise and the hare game where he fell back during the race almost on purpose, but then he finished really strong. In my experience, my number one mistake that I made early on was jumping into station number 2 of the Hyrox, which is the sled push, and just absolutely smashing it as fast as I possibly can. It's tempting because that happens to be my number one station in terms of strength. I'm really good at pushing a sled. Problem is, if I blast through that thing, I come out of there done, right? Like my legs are burning, my lungs are burning, and it takes me a while to get back into the zone. What I've learned to do is pace myself a little bit better, where I know, okay, I'm gonna push this sled for a number of steps. In my case, it's like 8 to 10 steps. I'm gonna stop, take a rest for like 3 seconds, and then I'm gonna get back to it. It's not as fast as I could go, but what it does is it saves the rest of my race. I don't go into the rest of the race like completely jacked up, feeling broken, feeling like, why am I even out here? My race is shot. I've made that mistake enough to know it's important to start a little bit slower. Now, as you progress with Hyrox and you get really good at it, if that's the path you go down, you might be able to start really fast and you might be able to finish even faster. But for us who are just getting into it, and it's like maybe our first one or our second one, try to start a little bit slower. It should feel easy, especially the ski erg, that first station. Don't watch what everybody else is doing next to you. Some people might be out there just blasting through it. Those same people, as I've learned this stuff, I've caught up to on the race, even though they came out of the ski erg, 20 seconds ahead of me. Later in the race, I'm passing them on the burpees, right? Because I still have my legs underneath me. I'm still really conditioned and feeling good. So start a little bit slower, which will allow you to finish a little bit stronger. The next thing I would do is make sure you do a Hyrox simulation, at least a couple times leading up to the Hyrox. Now, the first time you do it, you might do half of a Hyrox or even a third. Just cut everything down by thirds. Do the whole race in as organized and streamlined as you possibly can. Do it almost exactly like the real thing. If you don't have access to it, all good. I'm gonna give you some tips here in a minute on how to train for the Hyrox if you don't have some of the equipment. I know that's a big deal. So at the end of the day though, it's really hard to simulate what an actual Hyrox feels like until you get out and actually do a real Hyrox. Every race is gonna be a little different too. The distance that you run will stay the same, but the course might be a little different. The rock zone might be set up slightly differently, even though I will say they're a German-based company and they're amazing. Their engineering is like so spot on. So it's pretty consistent most times. But it's important for you to get your feet underneath you in terms of what does it feel like to actually do a Hyrox. So make sure 3 or 4 weeks out of your Hyrox race, do a Hyrox simulation, do the actual Hyrox. 8 weeks out, do a half Hyrox. Make sure that you're getting prepared for what an actual Hyrox feels like. That's a huge tip, one that I avoided for a while because I didn't want to burn myself out. I was like, nah, I'll get out there and do the real Hyrox. I'll save myself for that. I'll train for it, but I'll save my full Hyrox effort for actually doing Hyrox. Don't do that. Do an actual Hyrox simulation. Now, if you can't train with things like the ski erg, because not everybody has a ski erg. In fact, some people don't have a wall ball, right? They might have a ball they can get, but they don't have a target that they can aim for. Some people don't have a row machine. Some people don't have a sled. The sled pull is probably the least common one. You might have a sled, but then how do you pull a sled if you don't have a rope and you don't have an area to pull it? So here's what I'll tell you, and this is probably a video that I need to make. And if you want me to make this video, just leave a comment below. If you made it this far, please let me know. Do you want me to make a video on how to train for Hyrox if you don't have any of the equipment? I will absolutely make a video on that. Here's the thing, I'm fortunate enough where I have all the equipment. The only thing I sometimes don't have is the sled pull. I have a friend who has a gym who has one. Long story short, I don't always have access to this stuff, and maybe you don't either. So what do you do? Well, first of all, we got to understand what muscles are being worked when we do these movements. A sled pull, we're typically in like a half squat, right? And then we're pulling with our back. So I know it sounds kind of crazy and annoying, but you could probably find a place to do a pull of some kind, a row of some kind, where you're working on just endurance, right? You get in that position and one arm at a time, you're pulling back. You could do like a seated row with a one arm attachment, and you could do reps, right? At a heavier weight that challenges you, right? Now the key that would make it harder is running first and then doing that movement. Same with the sled pull, right? The one replacement I always use for the sled push. So the sled push, if you don't have a sled or don't have a heavy sled to push, the one I love recommending is the goblet squat, because if you think about it, when you push a sled, your arms are in tight, your chest is compromised, your breathing gets a little compromised. So a goblet squat, holding a goblet or a dumbbell or a kettlebell in this position will somewhat mimic that. And then when you're actually pushing, you're getting into a squat and you're pushing, right? You could do a lunge with a goblet, or you just do a goblet squat. Do it for reps, do the same number of reps as the steps you take when doing the sled. So there's a lot of other ways. Now the ski erg, that's another one. A lot of people don't have a ski erg. You could attach 2 bands to an overhead contraption of some kind, like a pull-up bar or a cable station, and you could pull 2 bands down the same way you're gonna be pulling down the ski. There's other ways to train for all these movements. And if you want, I'll put a whole video together. My whole point is be resourceful. Don't go, oh, I don't have a ski erg, so I can never train for that movement. Just got to get resourceful. Now I have a whole program on how to train properly for the Hyrox. If you want to check it out, the link to grab that is in the description below. I actually outline all the exercises you can replace these main exercises with if you don't have access to them. Plus I tell you exactly how to set up your training. It's a 12-week training program, so you can play around with it if you have less time, or if you need more time, I teach you how to add on some time to the 12 weeks. Go check that out in the description below, and you can actually get started today on getting ready for your Hyrox. So of course, I haven't really mentioned running yet, but of course that's a huge part of Hyrox. You're gonna need to run. You're gonna need to get better at running. You're gonna need to get better at running long distance. You're gonna need to get better at running fast, all the things running, right? So if you're not a runner, cool. Join my running club, the Not a Runner's Running Club. That's me. I hate running, or at least I've learned to hate it less over the years, but I'm never gonna be your prototypical runner. I'm not built like that, right? My physique is more of like a linebacker. I'm not a marathon runner. That being said, I still run marathons, you know? Like I do things even though I'm not that thing. I wanna challenge myself. So I'm telling you all this because if you're in that boat, we can be friends, we can relate. You're gonna have to do it, right? You're gonna have to suck it up and get out there and run. However, you can supplement some of your running with doing things that are other forms of cardio. Like if you enjoy swimming, or if you enjoy the elliptical or the stair climber or the bike, do those things, okay? Supplement your running, but just don't ignore the conditioning aspect that needs to take place if you want to get better at Hyrox. There's really three things conditioning wise, and we'll use running as the example here, but you can mimic the same thing with other forms of cardio. There's three areas of running that you need to get better at. Number one is low intensity, zone 2, long duration running. This is running for long periods of time at a lower heart rate. Over time, you'll get faster while keeping your heart rate down if you use these type of runs 70% of the time. Now, 20% of the time, you're gonna need to do what I call threshold runs. This is running at a much faster pace, typically a little faster than race pace, but for shorter distances, followed by rest intervals. Easy example would be running 1,000 meters at a threshold pace, followed by rest and recovery for 2 to 3 minutes, and repeating that. How much to repeat, it just depends on you and your level of fitness and where you are in your training program. The third kind of running is compromised running. Arguably, outside of the slow, long distance running, the most important one. This is where you have to get used to running under duress. And this is once again at a race pace. So if I go out and do burpees for 100 yards, and then I gotta go run 400 meters, that's compromised running. If I go out and I do a sled push for 50 meters and then I gotta go run, that's compromised running. You'll find that compromised running typically takes place in a Hyrox program, at least, on training days where you're doing some strength work, followed by some Hyrox conditioning. This is just to get your body used to doing things that require different modalities, different movement patterns, different energy systems, so your body can get used to going, oh crap, I just did a sled pull, now I gotta go run. And your heart rate can recover enough, and your legs are prepared enough to go out and run in a compromised state. Those are the three areas of running, or conditioning, if you want to call it that you need to be prepared for. So if you don't like running and you're like, yeah, I'm gonna do the stationary bike instead, cool. You would still do it the same way. You do some longer duration, low intensity biking. You would do some really fast biking for short periods of time, followed by rest. And then you would do bike after doing the stations. And I would still suggest getting some running going. But if your body just can't handle it yet, if you're just not prepared for running, it's all good. Doesn't mean you can't do this stuff. This is just the brutal and honest advice that I wish someone would have told me when I was starting out with Hyrox. Okay, last brutally honest piece of advice before we wrap things up. This one's really important. Don't let intimidation stop you from doing a Hyrox, because there's always other options. Here's what I mean. If you're not ready for a solo Hyrox, I get it, man. Like, I probably wasn't ready the first time I jumped out there, but I did, and I go, man, that was brutal. I wish I would have done something where I could have accomplished it in a little bit easier fashion. But easy is not really the name of the game here. What we want is something attainable. So guess what? You don't have to do a solo Hyrox. Pair up with a friend. Do a doubles, okay? You could pair up with another guy if you're a guy and do, the same sex race, or you could pair up with your wife or your spouse or your girlfriend or whatever, and you could actually go out and do the mixed race, right? The mixed couples race. Share the load, right? Go out and do things with somebody. You could even do a relay if you need more help. A relay is awesome. You got 4 people Every single person runs twice, every single person does 2 stations, and you share the Hyrox together as a team. That's fun, man. Like, and guess what? You could just train for the 2 stations you're gonna do with a little bit of running, and you'd be more than prepared to go out and smash it with your team. If you're racing as a team with a doubles partner, yes, you'll train for all the running, of course, because everybody has to run all the running, but you may only do half the stations, which is awesome. Gives you something to work on, and then that's a stepping stone to the next thing. So you might start with the 4-person relay, then you jump into the 2-person doubles competition, and then you go, all right, I'm gonna go into the solo. And guess what? There's even more levels. So there's the open, right, where the weights that you use are a little lighter. Then you go into the pro division, where the weights are heavier, the sled is heavier, the kettlebells on the farmer's carry is heavier. There's always next level stuff, all right? And then you could work on qualifying for worlds, and like, the list goes on and on. It's an endless adventure, even in something like a Hyrox. So just don't let being intimidated by doing a Hyrox by yourself stop you from jumping into a Hyrox. Now guys, check this out. I'm partnered with Hyrox. They are not sponsoring this video, but I am a Hyrox athlete. I'm fortunate enough to partner with them. They're a great organization. 2 things. Number 1, I have a Hyrox program. You can go check that out in the description below. You can start training for Hyrox right now with a very lifestyle friendly, built for the busy dad program just for Hyrox. Go check that out. Then if you're ready to sign up for a Hyrox, I have a discount code. You can use it. You can save money on your next Hyrox. It's in the description below. Check that out. Use the link to sign up for Hyrox, and I promise you will never regret pushing yourself past your comfort zone, doing a Hyrox, feeling fulfilled, crossing that finish line. Grab